This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are proving that when you make a sequel, you can take the original title and you don't just have to put a new word at the end. You can just put it right in the middle. We're talking not about Avatar: The Last Airbender, but Avatar Aang: The Last Airbender, a movie that came out to very little fanfare on streaming only. It is animated. It is from the creators of the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Paul Hoppe and I, who are great fans of the original, have had a lot of mixed thoughts, from very bad to middling, to enjoying some of it, and really liking some of it, about the various remakes and sequels and stuff like that have happened in the Avatar verse, are here to talk about it. So, Paul, let's just kind of, and as always, we're going to have some review type things. A lot of what we're going to talk about, though, is, this is the Superhero Ethics Podcast. We're not just going to talk about, did we like it, did we not? We're going to take more of an ethical lens. But today we'll probably have a little more of the do we like it, do we not? Because one of the things we want to talk about is what's kind of the responsibility when you remake something, when you do a sequel, when you add to the canon of something that is truly beloved. So, Paul, with that, what'd you think?
Did not like.
Yeah.
That would be pretty much the most concise way I could say it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't like it, and I don't even think it was bad. It just was, I was maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the movie, and I was just asking myself, who was this made for?
Yeah.
And we can get to that question later, but my immediate thought was not me, right? Mm-hmm. And it felt to me like it had so little of what I loved about the original series that it was like bordering on, it was kind of a difficult watch for me.
Yeah.
And Lee fell asleep. And she loves the original series. So, yeah. And I would just say it's an action movie. It's just an action movie. The original series was a series. It was like an adventure quest series that had action. Yeah. And this to me felt like an action movie first and everything else second or third or fourth.
I think that's really true. And I think I was more excited about it than you were at the start because of how I felt about the plot. And I think a lot of it, you're right, the plot didn't get as much attention as I would have liked because it was more of an action movie. I want to just say one or two quick things about the history of this movie. Mm-hmm. In terms of the official why it's being made, Nickelodeon has announced the Avatar Studios, a subdivision of Nickelodeon, where theoretically they're going to be putting out more Avatar projects. I don't know all the history of this. A lot of people have done great breakdowns of it. I don't want to just kind of find one and read one to you. But I do know that the original creators were involved with the live action TV show that I think is now on Netflix, that they had creative differences and they split away from it. And that this was kind of what they decided to be involved with instead. As to how much involved they are or not, I think there's some debate and things like that. But that's kind of like the official kind of history of the story of the creation of it. The history of the creation of it. So, and let me kind of jump into what was my first real issue. And the thing, though, that gave me hope at first, and that I think raises it's both an issue in the universe, but I think it's also much more of an issue outside the universe. If you've heard us talk before, you've heard me say that we actually did a number of episodes on Legend of Korra. And I said that one of my biggest frustrations with that is that I thought it raised, but then in the first season, the real kind of driver of the plot is this question of the equalizers. And it's basically like the non-bending people pointing out that there's quite literally a two-class system and that they are the lower class in that world. And the show kind of has some sympathy for them, But then also there's this whole plot about how their leader is actually not really interested in that, but has his own motivations. And we get really wrapped up in that, and we don't ever really deal with their concerns. And then later in the last season, their concerns are raised again, and I think are better resolved. I don't remember the exact details, but it definitely felt kind of weird and unresolved still. And so I started watching this movie, and my first thought when we meet this group called The Denied, which kind of, in and of itself, that name is interesting because it kind of makes you ask, like, it sounds like something that someone has made a conscious choice of saying, these people get to be benders, these people don't. And whether or not that was cosmologically ever an issue, the fact that these people feel that way, that would have been an interesting issue to explore. And so my first thought was, oh, they're going to explore this issue that was never really explored. This should be really cool. And then my second thought was, but wait a minute, if they fix this issue, then Legend of Korra doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So and then we get to what I'm now calling the problem of the midquel.
Yeah.
Like, more than anything, I'm feeling sequels are hard to do, prequels are really hard to do, but the hardest is this kind of midquel where it's like
both.
It's both, and where you have to both make the characters make sense from where they started. You also have to make sure that the characters in the world make sense into what it's about to become.
Yeah.
And somehow you have to tell a story in there. And of all the plot points they could have explored, why they chose one that is a central part of the first season of what comes next utterly baffles me.
Yeah, me too. My first reaction was not like, oh, good, this storyline, maybe they'll do it justice. It was like, oh, this again.
Yeah.
Fair. And it's not that I think it's an uninteresting idea. I think it is. It's just that the fact that there are all these, militants basically, and the way that they're portrayed, the lack of depth, the fact that there's like one character who kind of objects,
right.
and then doesn't necessarily stick with them the whole way. But it felt to me like, again, they're taking this same, almost like they did Legend of Korra and they felt like they didn't do it justice. So they're like, what if we do it less justice?
Yeah.
And I just want to briefly talk about the format, right? Where a couple weeks ago, I'm not sure exactly the timing of when these come out, but we talked with Pete about Lattice, right?
Right.
And it's a novella, and I was talking about how much I love the novella as a form, and if you have a story where the novella is the right format for it, then it's great to make it a novella. If you have a story where the novel is the right format and then you make it a novella, you have a problem.
War and Peace as a novella, not so good.
Right. Probably not going to work out so great. And the original series, the original animated series, had 60 episodes or 61, right?
Yeah.
That's a long time. They made those over several years. They had 20 in each, it was basically 3 stories. It was 3 books, they called them. And each one had, they were only 20-minute episodes, but that's like 7 hours of screen time to develop, one segment of basically one act of a 3-act story, essentially. And I remember when The Last Airbender, the movie with just that, no Avatar, because there was another Avatar out at the time. When that came out, and before it even came out, I was concerned because I was like, how are you going to take 7 hours of screen time and boil it down into a 2-hour movie? And the answer is by cutting out a lot of the good stuff,
right,
and using expository dialogue to like explain everything instead of showing anything. And so when that movie was as bad as I thought it was, I was like, well, you could have done a better job of doing what you did, but it's understandable that like you had a real challenge trying to condense that, right? And when they did the Netflix live action series, they did I think it was 8 episodes. Was it? It was 6 or 8 episodes.
They were more like 45-minute, I think.
Yeah. So then that's about 6 hours of screen time. So, it wasn't as episodic as, they didn't hit all the points, but there was a lot more room there for the story to breathe. And I didn't love some of the choices of that series, but I did feel like it was much more true to the original, at least in terms of like certain aspects and the ability to the way the story was told I mean, they had a bunch of like gratuitous violence that I really wasn't a fan of. But then looking at this is okay. This is a different story. Actually, sorry, Legend of Korra told 4 things, but each one was in, I think, maybe 13. Right. So right. Instead of telling one story that has 3 segments over the course of 60 episodes, Legend of Korra was like, we're going to tell 4 stories that are fairly different in 13 episodes each. Right. So they're already kind of fast forwarding. And they did a lot of great character development there, though. But in terms of the overall arcs of the antagonists, they didn't take the time. I don't want to say there's not time in 13 episodes, but it's more challenging. It's less time available, right? Agreed. And so then here now they're like, okay, we're going to try and tell a whole story. And not, by the way, we're going to also like recap some stuff that happened in the originals in case you haven't watched those. And we're going to try and do that in like an hour and 40 minutes. And an hour and 40 minutes is a great, or hour and 30, like that's a great runtime for an action movie, you know? Yeah. It's not a great runtime for a story that's going to really like get deep into character motivations and have a lot of characters and a lot of action. If you're gonna have a character driven story that's 90 minutes, fine, right? Now we get to hear a lot of conversations, things can develop over time. But when you're gonna have all of these huge set pieces, I mean, there was so much action in this, and I thought it looked really cool, but I also felt a little bit like it's harder to tell what's going on than in the original series. And it felt like they were just really suffering from that kind of sequelitis. Like, we're trying to make it big. We're trying to make it look great on the big screen. Yeah. And if I had never seen the original, maybe I would have liked it. I don't know. But within the frame of like knowing what I loved about the original and just seeing those characters on the screen, but not really the story or the way the story is told, matching the original at all, it was a tough watch.
Yeah, I think it's really true, and I think I agree that the animation I think was incredible. Like
fantastic.
And part of it just we're on a number of years later, animation technology has improved, but also clearly like they wanted to pay homage to that, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah.
And I will say there are varying stories coming out, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of like what really happened about this movie for a while to come, especially if we are going to get more Avatar studios, although the way this movie has been completely not well received and barely known about, I think also says that maybe Avatar Studios is not going to get very far off the ground, but we'll see. But it was meant to be released in theaters, and I it did have that feeling. And one thing I was thinking of, and I want to ask you specifically, is I am not a martial artist, but when you pointed it out, I was able to now look for this, and I really noticed that like the different kinds of water bending were clearly different kinds of martial arts.
The different types of bending.
Different types of bending. Yeah. So like, air bending is more kind of like Tai Chi, and like fire bending, I think, was more like karate, and like, I mean, I don't know.
Water bending's like Tai Chi. Fire bending's like Northern Kung Fu and types of karate that are based similar to that. Air bending is more circular motions. That's more like Goju-ryu karate. Right. And the earth bending is just very this like rooted style. Like each style does come, it has like a sort of earthly counterpoint, but also has very much its own character. For sure. Yeah.
And I didn't really see that. I think because so much of it was, we weren't seeing the precise motions of the hands. We were seeing the big swirls of wind flying through the air. And that looked cool, but it didn't look like Avatar to me.
Yeah, for sure. There was something about the original that, for the most part, everything was very visible. And I mean, the whole idea that they started with the bending and stuff was kind of trying to come up with something they thought would look cool. That would be a kind of fighting that could look good in animation. And I mean, I think hand drawn then. I don't know exactly how they do things now. And when we talk about technological innovation, I think it can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes the technology takes away some of the personality. I didn't really feel that here. I thought it really was visually spectacular, but not in a way impersonal, maybe is what I would say, and just the way the characters moved in the original there, it felt real. It felt like real people doing martial arts. And here I felt like they were farther away from me, in a way that I couldn't
sense.
really relate to the martial arts as well.
And I think another thing that for me made this a really hard adaptation, and we'll talk more about the why of it and like should it have happened in a second, but just kind of naming more of the concerns. I think it made me realize that there's a number of ways in which I do think you can tell stories about the same characters at different parts in their lives. I think the hardest, though, and one that we don't see very often, I think because it's really difficult, is to take characters who are literal children and then show them as adults. And I don't even mean like to show like, teenagers who are now in their like 20s or something, but these kids are all supposed to be like right around the time of puberty. Like, Aang is definitely prepubescent at the start and maybe
12,
starting to get that. The others, I think, are a little bit more on the other side of it, like 14, 15, up to I think Zuko is maybe the oldest. But to take all of those and make them adults, there are huge transitions that are made, and I think like a lot of the time, both physically, but also just personality wise, if you take a person who they are and then show someone who they were at 12 or 14, it's going to be very hard to find those, like it, or not that you can't see the connections, but that like at 14, imagining what someone will be like at 40, I think is a lot harder than if they're like 18 or 19. Like by no means there's still so much more room to grow, but like it just feels like a bigger shift. It also means that their voices have changed so they don't have the same voice actors. They all fundamentally looked the same to me, but I think it reminded me that one thing I really liked about Korra is that Korra kept some of those original characters, but aged them so much that they were background. They were not first of all, they just took Aang off the board entirely, which I think was very smart. And then they had characters like Toph and Sokka and Katara and the like in much small. Actually, I don't even know if Sokka was in it. I think it was just
Zuko.
Zuko was. Yeah, thank you. But they were in much smaller roles. And even then, a lot of people were like, "How would Toph become a cop? Please just
right, sure."
And I think that was also part of. I think that for me was one of the big problems with this was. This is showing them to me a much smaller amount of time, a much smaller time jump. Like this is really just like a couple of years after the 100-Year War has ended and the Avatar show has ended. And yet it was really hard for me to see the connections with these characters.
Is it only a couple of years? Like I had no idea how much time had passed. Did they say?
Don't.
Did that feel clear to you?
So I was going by a couple of context clues.
Okay.
Like, for me, the biggest context clue is that Aang and Katara do not yet have children.
Sure.
And so to me, like that means it's probably at least within 20 years.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Probably. Not necessarily, but probably.
Not
That's
necessarily.
Fair, yeah.
The fact
but also it's not within 3 years because like he was 12 in the other.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's probably at least like he does seem like an adult.
But again, you don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the drinking age or the voting age in this world is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was somewhere between 5 and 15 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Republic City is a city, right?
Right.
So like they built a city in this time.
Yeah.
So
and I think she says at the start that it's the 3rd anniversary of the founding of Republic City or something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, but it like there's one moment where Sokka does a very Sokka thing where they're talking about how they're stuck in this world where the forever storm is around them. And he does his sort of Sokka freak out, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And zooms all around. And it felt so weird to me because that to me was an action of Sokka, the child, and like showing that like he's one of the ones who has the weight of the world on his shoulders and is just a child sometimes in the original. And that's part of the brilliance of it. And watching him do it in that moment, I was like, this feels like you're trying to remind me that this is who Sokka was. But because the rest of the time it's been Sokka as an adult, it doesn't click for me.
Yeah. Yeah. None of that really bothered me, but I feel you. Like I definitely, I think it's objectively difficult to both to portray a character at very different ages and to kind of just imagine what someone's going to be like. And I think all of us probably have our own experiences of changing or not changing at different ages. And that probably colors our perception of what we expect someone's going to be like later. Right. And, you know, this was a challenge in other stories. I won't get into it, but of like seeing what a character is going to be like way later. And this is not as much later. Right. But, and it's, yeah, I just think it's difficult. None of that like really felt wrong to me. Mm-hmm. But it still, it felt like there wasn't enough time to even really know, you know, whether like there were, you know, I feel like Sokka maybe had 5 moments kind of in a way, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. Like Toph had like 3 or 4, and like, you know, Zuko had a couple, and, you know, Katara maybe had a few more, but not a lot. You know, I mean, she had her whole, you know, I'm Katara, I'm going to do the scolding thing and say we shouldn't do the plot, but then the plot's going to happen because somebody else is going to decide to do the plot. But, mm-hmm. you know, it just felt like there wasn't time to really feel how they had changed or hadn't changed in a way, you know? And so I can see how something feels like a false note when it feels like they're too much like they were at another age. I think some people change a lot and some people don't change that much. Yeah. You know, and the thing is, if you have time to really sit with the character, then I think if they're a way that kind of surprises you or doesn't feel right to you, if you sit with them long enough and they do a good job, it can make sense, I think. Yeah. Right. But when they only have a little bit of screen time to like do anything kind of, then it's like, yeah, if something feels a little off, it's like there's no time to kind of make it right, I guess.
Another moment that to me felt like they were trying to shove in some of the things that people loved about the original, but it felt very out of touch and out of tone. In the middle of this fairly dark fight of like, will a city be destroyed by this incredible violence? We get the Cabbage Man.
Yeah.
Like it, and like at first, like the Cabbage Man gets knocked over and all the cabbages go flying, and then we see him go out of screen and he doesn't say anything for a good 2 seconds. Yeah, and I was like, oh, they had the restraint to not put up. Nope, there's the line. Yeah, I wanted to love that. So like early on when they're just showing Republic City, someone is singing Secret Tunnel in the background.
Right. Yeah, and you see the cabbages, but like there's nothing happening about the cabbages.
That was fine.
Yeah. And again, that's the sort of thing that like, it didn't really bother me, but like also it felt like perfunctory a bit. Right. Although I will say I appreciated that at first it seemed like he was actually just like sad about his cabbages. Yeah. It was like a little different tone. It was Ken Jeong, that was one of the kind of more famous actors that I didn't recognize in the moment. Yeah. Which by the way, I found a little distracting earlier. A couple where I was like, oh, that's so-and-so. Oh, that's so-and-so. And
it's a little hard for Dave Bautista to be anyone but Dave Bautista.
Yeah. And I didn't know that was Dave Bautista. I was talking about like Ronnie Chang and Ki Hui Kwan and, you know, but yeah, no, I mean, but you noticed, right? Yeah. And there was a thing going back to, I think Aladdin, where I think Robin Williams was like, okay, I'll do this role, but like, please don't market it like Robin Williams as, you know. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, yeah, no problem, Robin. We won't do that. And then of course, and you know, part of the idea was like voice acting is a thing, right? And like, I feel like there's no need to have like famous voice actors all the time. But obviously there's a financial incentive where it's like, oh, we get to put this person's name on the poster, right? Yeah. And I love all those actors that I was mentioning, right? I think they're great, but like I would rather usually have more kind of like nameless voices most of the time. And I thought they were good. They did a good job, you know.
And that's another issue that we can discuss at some later point and have discussed earlier, because a lot of voice actors have pointed out how unhappy they are at a lot of times, especially when it is something where like it's a small project and it doesn't have a huge budget. So they hire voice actors, but then it becomes a big hit. And so then they take it to a larger format. And all of a sudden now you're hiring well-known people. there's also, I don't think this affected this movie in terms of when it was made. But there was a glut of things where you had very famous actors doing voice acting because they were allowed to do that while they were on strike, because that wasn't covered by the terms of that, because that's a different kind of contract. So anyway,
and before that, you probably had some things like that because of COVID, and it was like, well, I could do this in my home or in a kind of, whatever.
It's like, there may be a baseball lockout next year. We don't know. And I hope those guys, I mean, they're doing pretty well financially. I imagine they're going to be okay with a strike, but, or lockout or whatever it is. And all of them went down to go play in the Mexican League. That'd probably get some pretty awesome games. I imagine the players in the Mexican League.
Robinson Cano would be like, hey, what's going on? Let me lead the league in batting in peace. Come on. I'm 42.
All right, so back to this. Okay. Yeah, so I think we're kind of, I get a sense of where we are, but I'm just going to put it kind of in a frank mode. Like, why do you think this movie was made, and should it have been made?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So I'll start with what my kind of framing was that, like, who is this made for, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, why is it made? The answer is just always money, I think, right? Like, when it actually gets made. I mean, maybe there's some artistic drive, right? Obviously, that is part of why the people who want to do the making make a thing, right? That's very often a big thing, and that might have been here. Maybe it's like, oh, we felt like we had more story to tell, so we wanted to tell that. But as far as, like, why does the thing get backed and a lot of money gets invested in it? It's because they think they're going to make more money, right? So I think they see Avatar as, the financial people are like, well, this is a very popular show. It's a valuable intellectual property, and and they're like, so I think in that regard, it's a very kind of, that's the cynical take. And then there's the question of, like, who is it made for? And I think that's interesting, because I can think of three groups of people that it could be made for, like, primarily age-based, but also kind of just like relationship to the series. Maybe I'll add a fourth that's not age-based. One, people like us who watched the original series as adults and then would like to see more, potentially, of, loved the original series as adults, and thus anything else, like, we're seeing kind of probably with a more similar lens than we saw the first, right? There's not, like, I loved the original series. It's maybe my favorite series of all time. It's definitely, like, top 5. And maybe definitely top 3. But, like, I don't have nostalgia related to it, right? Like, a little bit. Like, I remember I was watching it while I was writing my first book, I think in 2010, 5 or so years after the series came out. So I didn't watch it when it was coming out. I wasn't part of, like, anybody talking about it. Just, like, my wife and I were sitting on the couch watching it while I was, like, relaxing between, actually, it might have even been before I was writing the book. It was, like, while I was doing this ridiculous grindathon where I was locking myself in my apartment for 28 days straight. And the point being, like, we don't have this, like, childhood memory of watching this, right?
Very true.
Then there are people who watched the original series as children, who are maybe the age of the characters or a little younger, and probably have some form of nostalgia around what that was. And then now a new movie could be kind of trading on that nostalgia, and also, but it would have to then be a kind of more adult, like, the characters are more their age now, and it's kind of, okay, well, you watch this show kind of for kids as a kid, and now you're watching something that's a little more for adults as an adult. And then the other two groups would be just new people who didn't really, who aren't that familiar with the original somehow, right? Which I think is plenty of people. And either people who might just like this movie and then get into the original and kind of go down the rabbit hole a bit, or, like, kids now, right? Who are, like, maybe the age that the original series was, like, primarily targeted at. I mean, of course, it was of a quality that it was able to resonate with people of all ages, right? And it had depth and layers. But Yeah, so I don't know. I don't have an answer like who this was really made for. I mean, I guess I'd ask like who do you think this is most meant to appeal to?
I think I have an answer. I think part of it, I'm going to complicate a couple of things you said a little further.
Oh, excellent.
One is that I think I'm going to kind of combine two of your categories because I'm already aware of the idea that my child is still 1 year old. They would not understand anything they watch, but I'm really excited to show them the things that I love: Star Wars, and Star Trek, and Marvel, and The Wire when they're at least like
at least 7.
And Avatar, and one thing that I've been talking to parents a lot about this kind of thing. One thing that a lot of them have said is that stuff changes and just stuff gets a lot faster. Like to modernize movies from the 70s or even the 90s can appear very slow or very outdated or things like that. And that a lot of them have found that, like sitting down with a couple of kids and showing them movies from the 70s doesn't work. But if they're the age of the prequels or they're the age of the sequels, they watch those and then they get interested in Star Wars and they want to go back and watch the other stuff. And that actually has been true of a lot of these, like that a lot of the nostalgia bait things is for adults, but it is not entirely, but it has a particular relevance for parents where it's like, I want to introduce you to this world that I love. And so I'm going to show you this. And then hopefully you'll sit and watch the old fogey version that I really loved.
Right.
I think that's a part of it. I also think Legend of Korra has a lot to do with why this one was made. In part because Legend of Korra was fairly successful. It was not as successful as the original, and there's a lot of issues and debates about the making of it. But especially for, at least, I think one of the reasons why it was disappointing to, I think, specifically the group of people who grew up with the show, is that they did want to see what the Avatar gang was like when they grew up. And so that thing that you and I had said was kind of a benefit to Korra, of Aang is totally off the table, and the others are not really there and are certainly quite old. I do know, and I've read a lot of folks talk about like that they were really frustrated that Korra didn't give that to them. So I think that is a part of it. And then I also think this battle over, and again, I found various things online, a lot of which seem to be taking one small fact or one small line from an interview and doing so much conjecture. So I don't want to say that I know who is right or wrong in any of this. But clearly, a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings that are in disagreement with each other about what the legacy of this beloved show should be and who should get to tell it and how it should be told. And I think I can look at that from a very sympathetic background of artistic vision and stuff like that. I can look at it from a more cynical viewpoint of ego and who gets to cash the checks, and the truth is probably somewhere in between. But I feel like all of those things went into, and probably the fact that some of these other recent Avatar things have been successful. I would imagine that all of that had a hand in the making of this movie.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I find it so incredibly frustrating that people go back and look at older things and just feel like, oh, this is slow and slow bad, basically. I don't know. I feel kind of fortunate for watching 40s movies as a kid and kind of not being just of the, it was the MTV generation or whatever, right? Where things started having lots of quick cuts. And I have nothing against that. It's just I have something against that as just the norm, and it's it has to be that way, and everything. Just seeing short form videos and so many other things about the world just rotting people's attention spans. It's rough, and
and to be clear, I think that specific thing is a part of it. I do think there's a larger element of people struggling to enjoy things from many generations ago, some of which I think are come on guys, it doesn't have to be the way you want it to be. But some of it, animation technology has improved a lot.
I can certainly see someone go back and watch the first seasons of the Clone Wars and being like, this doesn't look good, even then it didn't look great, or
a lot of stuff has been remade because it's hey, this is a really cool idea, but maybe someone besides white boys can play, like
fair enough.
There's that level of updating.
Yeah.
There's the idea of, like, I think some of the idea of the new Star Trek movies was the original Star Treks are great. The technology was real bad.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I think all of that it goes into it, but I agree with you very much. I don't like the idea of, because we can do it now with better technology, with bigger technology, faster, all this stuff, that means we should remake it. And I do think that's a part of what happened here. And I for me, what I balance it with, because you're saying about, like, all the times these are happening, it's because of money. And I don't think you're wrong. One of my real heroes, though, is Suzanne Collins. Suzanne Collins is the writer of the Hunger Games books. And she has written a number of sequels over a very, like, she could have been writing far, far more of them.
Mm-hmm.
She has said that she will only write something when she feels she has something to say.
Yeah.
And it is very clear that each of the 2 sequels that have come out and the movies that have come out along with them, like, she hasn't, like, done, like, all the, like, kind of the background of all these different characters kind of stuff. She's had specific issues that she looks out at the world at and says, I want to tell a version of the story that comments on this thing.
Yeah.
And not even mean like a specific thing like Gaza, but on just like general, like, societal issues and things like that. And now, granted, the first trilogy was wildly successful. The first set of movies was wildly successful. So, I don't think she would say, I don't know why all of you are writing for money. You should only write for art. I think she'd be the first to say, I do that because I have enough. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Probably doesn't hate the fact that she's getting some pretty nice checks as the movies come in, but, like, she achieved a level of financial stability and independence and wealth that allows her to do that I doubt people who created a successful show for Nickelodeon a couple of years ago have reached. And, like, I get some of that, but I do feel like with something like Avatar, I kind of wish that was more of a, like, I watched a TikTok video about this from a creator who I really like. And he does reviews all the time. And he said his review of this was, it was fine. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. It was an Avatar movie and it was fine. And I had this, like, visceral reaction of, like, if all you're going to get is fine, don't make the movie.
Right.
Like, something as perfect and as beloved as the original, like, if you've got something really interesting to say, if a writer comes along and is like, I have a really new take on this whole benders, non-benders thing, or I want to really explore something about this view of the 4 elements, and what if, like, a new kind of idea of bending comes along that is a very different view of the elements or something like that, or I'd love to see that. But to me, the fact, I part of why I started with that idea of this being the benders, non-benders issue is, like you said, it's been done before numerous times.
Yeah.
And it felt just like there was nothing new that these writers wanted to say. There was no new discussion they wanted to bring up, or no new take on the characters. It was just, let's tell a story and let's have a lot of cool action.
Yeah, I mean, if pressed to, like, I think the benders, non-benders was, like, kind of a red herring. Mm-hmm. I think the story was really about, what does it mean for, like, what is a culture, essentially? What does it mean to be a people? And, like, to have, a people, genocided, basically, and have, like, maybe a couple survivors.
Right.
And, like, is rebuilding that culture a thing that can be done? Like, if you just give a bunch of people airbending, it's like, that's not the airbending culture.
Right.
You're not,
and
like,
what do you do about the anger of your culture being almost genocided?
Exactly.
And now and all that is,
well, you go and find another culture to genocide. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm getting back to real world. But yeah, and it felt like, and then, we're going to be the air empire. And it's like, didn't we do this with the earth empire? Like in season 4 of Korra. Right. And it just, when it comes to, like, the actual creators, like the people who were originally involved in the original series, I do imagine, I expect it is mostly about kind of creative control and, like, wanting to, having a story. Like, they had enough of a story they wanted to keep telling that they made graphic novels, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think they made graphic novels just, like, for money. It was like, well, we're not going to do a 4th season, so we'll do a 4th season in books.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a certain kind of like love of the game there, right? There's like, these are my characters and I want to keep telling stories with them. And I don't really have any problem with making something that's just fine, because like if you make something that's fine, there's going to be some people who love it probably, right?
Okay.
And it's like, you've made that for them. Like I've accepted that the Star Wars prequels and sequels and a lot of the other shows, just like, they're just not for me. Like they just weren't made for me. They were made with whatever in mind, and some people love them, some people hate them. I have mixed feelings about different ones. And one of the other movies that I thought of while watching this was The Phantom Menace, right? Yeah. It was like absolutely beloved original trilogies, and viewing the Airbender as like 3 books, right? Mm-hmm. Water, Earth, and Fire. And then like 20 years later, give or take, okay, now we're going to like do something again. And they did something in between, but like this is actually a continuation of that story, right? Which, when I guess that was prequels then, whatever. But the point being, like, there was a big gap of time, and then, okay, here's something new from the same people who did this. And it just wasn't what I wanted. I knew enough this time though not to get excited, right?
Yeah.
Like these types of things where you make something and you lay back for a while and then you come back to it a long time later, I think it's really hard to either get it right or to please the people who, like, it's hard enough to make a sequel.
Yeah.
But making a sequel 20 years later, like that's next level, and I think it so rarely works out. I wish people would stop doing it, but also like, I hope there's people who love this movie, right? I hope that there's people who see it and then go watch the original because like they got into the characters, and hopefully they love the original. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But like, it didn't do it for me, and I wish there wouldn't be so much of this type of stuff where it was more just like, can we just tell some new stories with new characters? Like, does everything have to be a verse? I guess so.
I definitely feel that. And I'm going to say something briefly about how I felt about the newest Spider-Man movie, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
That it's not really spoilery, but I think says something about, I found that I really love, I think it is as a Spider-Man movie, fantastic, and does a very good job connecting itself to the larger world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because it is the last movie before Doomsday, something that has been built up to this Infinity War kind of level story, that a lot of people, myself included, are frustrated that we haven't had a lot of like, bits in other movies to help set it up. That was in my head in a way I didn't want it to be. And I was like, I kept waiting. Okay, so how is this movie going to help me better understand what's going to happen in Doomsday? Right. Where is Thanos at the end reaching for the glove? Where is the Chitauri?
Right.
Like, anyway.
You're wearing kind of Doomish colors, by the way. It's kind of that same green, with the black. I don't know.
Star Wars. I know nothing about Doomsday. So you brought it up?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of silver in the Doomsday.
Yeah, silver, but I think green. I think it's Cape's green, something like that. Silver, black, and green, and that seems, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
So, Magic the Gathering reference. And yes, and I think I'll also say, in defense of the writers, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about, but we've heard stories from other people about, like, what writers have to do to get the money people to sign on to let them do what they really want to do.
Yep.
And in some ways, like, I don't love this, but I wish it would be more successful if the goal, because this is completely conjecture, but it would not be by any means out of line to say, hey, we're going to do a movie, and if the movie's successful, we'll fund you to do a series,
Sure, yeah.
And that the studio wanted it to be more actiony or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples of this that I use, I don't think you've ever watched it, but I love The Orville.
Oh yeah, I didn't watch it. I'm familiar though.
Fantastic show. It is a send up of Star Trek while also being I think of it as a Star Trek show. It is basically him doing everything he could to write a Star Trek show while not officially being allowed to.
Right.
And he makes fun of it in some ways, but also love letter to it, and he also updates it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I was not excited to watch it because I don't like a lot of Seth MacFarlane humor. I don't like Family Guy. I don't like a lot of the kind of like shtick that he uses. And a lot of the first half of the first season has a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it almost disappears entirely. And he is especially because like his relationship with the first creator of the show ended and he moved it over to a different network and called it something different. He has said quite openly in numerous interviews, yeah, they didn't trust me to not, they thought everyone's going to want to see a Seth MacFarlane show. So you have to give them Seth MacFarlane humor.
Right.
And it really frustrated him because he wanted to move beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was only once the producers were like, okay, yeah, your first half, you're doing well. You're getting good numbers. We're not going to be looking over your shoulder all the time. That he just stopped doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And turned it into what I think is just a legitimately great science fiction show that does fantastic exploration of some complicated issues, including some like, yeah, maybe Star Trek got this thing wrong. Let's maybe talk about it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so maybe now I'm throwing all the blame onto the money people instead.
I mean,
I'm always like,
why not? Right? Like, come on.
But like to me,
we don't even know their names.
I do wonder if there was also that thought of the kind of show that you and I are talking about, and that like a lot of people have similar concerns. We are not off on an island here.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that part of that's that like, and I get big budget explosions do sell a lot of tickets. I get that.
Yeah.
But I do think there's this overcorrection now of everyone wants it to always be big action, big graphics, big explosions.
Skybeam.
Yeah, a lot of people want something else and that they're not getting it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even know what I want. Like, I haven't really watched a lot of new things for a while. Like, I watched like Murder, She Wrote and Columbo and Cheers, and I feel like most of the time I watch something new, I'm like often disappointed. I'm sure there's like a lot of good stuff out there that I'm not watching.
Yeah.
But it definitely feels to me like you can kind of feel, I think, when I mean, if we just use the original series as an example, like the first season had a lot more kind of like, kind of kiddie humor kind of stuff, and that stayed with the show, but they kind of eased into getting into, I mean, they talk about a genocide in the first episode, right? But like they kind of ease into the heavier stuff and maybe slower paced stuff. And, maybe that's kind of the same thing, where it's, you kind of win over an audience, but also like win over the network's trust to the point where they say, okay, you can kind of do, what you want to do. And we'll trust you to make something that people love.
Right.
And we'll, kind of be more hands off. And I could see how this could be that kind of thing, I don't know anything about the making of, I knew about the live action series and that, the creators of, the first series were involved and then not involved and all these different things in terms of direction. And like, I don't think they made something bad here. I found the antagonist annoying, like both antagonists. I thought it was like a super predictable twist. And I didn't like the story overall, really, I have harsher words that I won't say. And at one point these are harsher words. At one point I was like, I feel like I'm watching Quantum Mania, like, where it's just like, I'm like, where are we? Like, cause it's like, I want to see the land. Like that's like it's rooted in the elements. Right. Yeah. And everything here felt like there were only extreme elements instead of like the real land. And so I felt like I wasn't seeing the world that I knew. And it wasn't because the world has changed so much. It was because they just happened to go to these like ridiculous places. Right. And so it felt just kind of like at sea and like didn't have that rooting. And and so I found it not incredibly disappointing because I didn't have high expectations. But it was just like, I think the person you're referencing kind of nailed it. Like, it was fine. They didn't have a bunch of characters doing things way out of character, right? I felt like they knew who the characters were. They hadn't grown a ton for the most part, emotionally or whatever. They were pretty similar, but not exactly similar. Like, it wasn't that there were a lot of things that bothered me. It just didn't have the things that I loved. And
like I think we can draw a clear distinction. Like, this is miles better than the M. Night Shyamalan live action. Yeah.
No, this is a good movie. It's just not a great story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that was like a terrible movie. Terrible. Like,
that was terrible.
Epically bad.
It was racist. It was like really like so much was wrong. And that really felt like a kind of cynical, like, we don't understand the real story. This clearly did. And I guess, and I understand why you're not quite with this, but I get that. I think for me, there's just a sense of, like, or maybe we are kind of on similar pages, just saying it different ways, but also like, I don't, to me, it's like, I agree with you, and you're like, I don't want there to keep being remakes and remakes and remakes.
Yeah. And this isn't a remake, right?
Yeah.
This
I mean, like
a
remake.
midquel.
I don't want there to keep being returns to the same old IP.
Yeah.
I feel like I think like some of that's fine, but I want the barrier to be like, there's a new story to be told, like, and I didn't feel like I came out of this. I didn't learn anything new. I didn't learn anything new about the world. I didn't learn anything new about Aang. Like, the way Aang solved it felt very much like what Aang would do.
Yeah.
There was a moment where Mary and I were looking at each other and being like, what? He really wants to repopulate all the air nomad. Is the answer polygamy? Like does he need to have like?
Not gonna lie, I had that thought, and I figured it would appeal to you. Not even polygamy, but just like go and just sow your seed. Like, that is actually the practical solution, right? It's like it's right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Katara. So I'm the last Airbender, and we need more Airbenders. So. And
if I have children with a non-bender, there's a much better chance it'll be an airbender.
Is that how? Do we even know how that works?
I think some of their kids are waterbenders.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
But it could also be like that. There's the bender gene, and
right?
That when you mix, then you're more likely it can come out water or air. Whereas if it's with a non-bender, then it's more likely neither. I don't know.
I don't know.
They didn't. At least they didn't tell us anything about midichlorians.
Yeah.
I think we can give them credit for that.
There's no midichlorians. Like, there's a way in which that argument can lead to eugenics real fast.
Yeah.
That would be bad too.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah. Last thing I'll say about it is, and again, it's part of why I think I didn't like it is it felt like it was playing with things without understanding the significance of them. Because I do think there's something they say that fundamentally changes the canon as we know it in a way that makes sense, but that I wish they explored more. Because the opening line of the show is the four elements lived in balance until the Fire Nation attacked.
Right.
And we get this backstory about the comet and about the history and of how the Fire Nation decided to break the balance. And this is kind of saying, actually, no, like, there were numerous times in the past where one nation or another broke the balance. And like, that's an important historical detail. I would 100% believe it. And I believe that people would forget about that and just think, oh, it was always in balance before the Fire Nation attacked.
Right. That's the story that the Water Tribe told their kids, that it was all in balance until the Fire Nation attacked. But was it?
Or especially the Earth Kingdom did, because they didn't want that history of like their malfeasance from the past.
The Earth Kingdom's history is there is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Well, yes, also true. But yeah, just to me, it was one of those things where it's like you're throwing these rocks out all over the place without realizing like the incredibly interesting and also important ripples that they're causing.
Well, I have nothing to add, and neither did they.
Yeah. You do have some things to add to the conversations in the world around poker, though.
That's true.
And a lot of them are not just about poker. They're also about life. They're about topics like quitting and sunk cost theory and sunk cost fallacy and how to start a project and not just have an idea in your head. Paul, if people wanted to crack your head open and scoop out the good thoughts and get to play with them a little bit, perhaps in a less gruesome metaphor than I just put forth into the world. I just watched some Bluey where the kids do an operation on Dad, and so it's just in my head now.
I see.
Where can they find you?
Yeah, so please don't, no scooping. But I did have a math teacher once where I was leaning back in my chair, and they all thought that I was going to fall over and crack my head open, and they were like, "That would be interesting, though." So anyway, Yes, I have a website, zenmadman.com, where I write a weekly newsletter called Friday Night is My Monday Morning. And you can sign up for the newsletter and get it in your email inbox. What do they call it? Inbox. Yeah. Inbox. Weekly on Fridays, or you can just go to my site and click on the thing and read the latest entries. I also have assembled the first 24 entries into a book called Zen Madman's Friday Night is My Monday Morning, Volume 1. And there's a superhero ethics code, SHE 400, for 40% off the book on my website. That's in PDF form. I don't want to say format because the F is format. But and then also I think there might be some other links for the physical copies in the show notes, right?
Yeah, lots of ways to purchase the books. All of them will help Paul. All of them will help this podcast. One of them will help Bezobucks, but you got to keep those yachts fueled.
You got to keep the yachts fueled.
We recognize Amazon is what's going to work for some people, and we understand that. But there's also lots of other good ways to find it without supporting that particular fellow. So, on behalf of myself, Paul, thank you all so much for listening. We have spoken.
Yip, yip. I was going to add a motherfucker. I did it.